All right, welcome to the Gospel Answer series, and it's simply a series to present the gospel as what it proves itself to be the truth. So we're going to be running down through different things that the gospel answers. Now, this is a simplified version of the answer series. There will be the critical version, and I trust that from that, your queries and questions, your doubts and borderings about the validity or truths of the gospel will be resolved. Now, to the very first video, to the very first subject matter, I should say, that we're going to be looking at, Ephesians 1:13 would be our starting text. Ephesians 1:13 says, in him, talking about Jesus, you trusted after you heard the word of truth. So it says we believed on Jesus when we heard the word of truth. That means that the reason that we believed on Jesus is not simply because our emotions were high, it's not simply because we felt this way or that. Now, understandably, by the working of God's Spirit, at the instance of salvation, we could have different experiences that inspired the decision for salvation. But the underlying premise of our faith in the gospel, it says, is the fact that it is the truth. So you believe the gospel when you heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation. So he calls the gospel, which we believe to be saved, the word of truth. Then it says, in whom having believed, we were sealed with the spirit of promise. So because of this faith we have, we are now found as a people of God with his spirit. So there's a big claim here, right, that the gospel is making, and that's the claim that it is the truth. And it's precisely what we want to examine in this series, the Gospel Answer series. If the gospel claims to be the truth, we need to find out truth about what, we need to find out, does it really prove itself to be truth, etc., etc. Now, you might have watched the video on the most important question you need answered, or the video titled as well. I think it should be titled "Why You Need to Believe the Gospel Now." So that's like a very, very simple version of the gospel for your salvation. What we are doing here is to clear further doubts that may be lingering, or for some people who still struggle to accept the truth of the gospel. We are solidifying the evidence of the gospel as truth to the end that you believe it for your salvation, and subsequently that you trust it for your walk in its revelation of purpose. Right? So I want to just give us a brief introduction for now, so still have a little time here, and I'm going to take us to Romans chapter 1 for the next thing that we're going to see. Romans 1, you see, in Romans and chapter 1, here, when Paul speaks, Romans chapter 1 and verse 16, he was talking about the gospel as well. He says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. So one thing is clear, the same gospel in Ephesians 1:13 is the same gospel he's speaking of here. You remember Ephesians 1:13 says, you believe the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation. Here it says the gospel of Christ, that is the power of God to salvation. And it says it's the power of God's salvation for everyone who believes. So it's not saving everybody just by virtue of it being the gospel, but it's saving those who believe, right? So it's the power of God's salvation to those who believe, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. So something is clear. If it's saving us from a mess. And it's saying it's saving us by making us right, the righteousness of God. What is right? It's giving us that righteousness of God, or it's making us right the way God wants, because we have faith. But this is what I want you to see before we wrap up this particular video. In verse 18, it says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven. Now, in the same message where the righteousness of God is revealed, it says the wrath of God is revealed, which makes sense because the message that saves is saving you from something. It's describing what we are being saved from with the terminology, the wrath of God, which would require some explanation later down the line. Right? So it says, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and all unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So what I want you to notice here is we're told on the one hand that the righteousness of God or salvation is revealed to those who believe, but on the other hand that the wrath of God is revealed to those who suppress the truth. What did the first set believe? The gospel. What do the second set suppress? The truth. Essentially the same thing. It's simply calling the gospel the truth, just like Ephesians 1:13 did. Why does the gospel claim to be truth? And does it prove itself to be so? That's what we'll see in the next video or the next episode of this Gospel Answer series. catch you on that one.